The procedure commenced, and Elliot succumbed to the effects of anesthesia. Gradually, the lights dimmed, enveloping him in a cocoon of darkness. His consciousness faded, leaving only the echo of his thoughts reverberating in his mind. In the depths of this mental abyss, Elliot found himself in an unfamiliar realm. Above him stretched a vast expanse, resembling a celestial canopy, punctuated by sparse twinkling stars. At its center hung a colossal antique pocket watch, casting an ethereal glow upon the surreal landscape. The hands of the watch hovered ominously at the stroke of midnight. Beneath his feet, a desolate terrain of ashen gray rock sprawled out, its surface chilled by an unseen chill. A subtle breeze whispered through the void, lending an air of mystique to the surroundings. Amidst this boundless emptiness, devoid of discernible landmarks, Elliot stood alone, confronted by the abyss. Summoning his courage, Elliot ventured forth, his voice trembling as he called out into the void. His words hung in the air, dissipating into the darkness. Was this a dream? It felt too vivid, too palpable to be a mere figment of his imagination. As he pressed onward, a distant glimmer flickered on the horizon, a faint beacon of hope amidst the void. With each step, Elliot quickened his pace, spurred on by the elusive promise of salvation. Casting occasional glances over his shoulder, he found only an endless expanse of darkness trailing behind him, punctuated by the rhythmic echo of his footsteps. Navigating the featureless landscape proved challenging, with no reference points save for the distant lights beckoning him forward. Determined to reach his destination, Elliot forged ahead, his resolve unyielding despite the uncertainty shrouding his path. CLIK. At last, the grand clock's hands completed their journey, signaling the passage of time. As Elliot drew nearer to his destination, additional lights emerged on the horizon, gradually illuminating the mysterious compound. Surrounded by a weathered perimeter fence adorned with menacing barbed wire, the compound came into view. 4 imposing towers loomed over the enclosure, their steel frames interlocked by the formidable barriers. Eerie flames flickered within giant braziers, casting an ominous glow upon the scene, revealing a cluster of roughly hewn wooden shanties and assorted concrete edifices at the compound's heart. Caught in a whirlwind of disorientation, Elliot gazed upon the compound in disbelief, his thoughts spiraling into chaos. A sense of déjà vu tinged his confusion. Hadn't he encountered a place like this before? Yet the purpose of this desolate outpost eluded him. Was it a figment of his anesthesia-induced dreams, or a manifestation of his subconscious fears? Blinking in disbelief, Elliot half expected to awaken from this surreal nightmare. Yet, the shifting shadows and ominous movements beyond the fence dispelled any hope of respite. The sudden illumination of torches along the perimeter sent shivers down his spine, heralding the ominous opening of the compound's massive gates. With a deafening screech that reverberated through the air, the gates slowly parted, accompanied by a cacophony of bell tolls. Figures emerged from the darkness, their torches casting an eerie glow upon their ominous silhouettes. As the figures drew closer, Elliot observed their uniform attire, a sinister ensemble reminiscent of a bygone era, adorned with rusted metal buttons. One of them signaled for Elliot to halt, prompting him to raise his hands in surrender, his gaze darting nervously between the encroaching figures. Approaching with deliberate strides, the faceless sentinels closed in, their eerie presence unnerving Elliot to his core. Straining to discern their features, he found only blank visages, faces weathered by time, resembling ancient wood worn by the elements. The remnants of their Gestapo uniforms bore witness to years of neglect, their once imposing allure now reduced to tattered remnants. Elliot quivered at the sight of the enigmatic figures, his feet numbed by a creeping chill. A sense of unease coiled in the pit of his stomach, refusing to dissipate. His breath quickened, ensnared by uncertainty. Was this a nightmare unfolding before him? With a beckoning gesture, both figures motioned for Elliot to follow, while wooden hands clasped his shoulders from behind, urging him forward toward the looming gates. Anxiety surged through Elliot, settling in his chest and infiltrating his thoughts, shrouded by the ambiguity of his surroundings. Instinctively, he tensed his muscles, resisting the inexorable pull of the figures behind him. Moments passed in suspended silence as Elliot stood his ground, only to be abruptly jostled by a forceful shove from behind, unbalancing him, but held in a tight grip. With greater insistence, they propelled him toward the gate, their grip unyielding. Above, the clock's hands shifted, casting an eerie glow upon the scene. The figures before him parted ways, assuming positions on either side of the gate, their batons poised for action. Behind him, the motionless sentinel surged forward, propelling Elliot off balance once more, thrusting him beyond the gate and into the enclosure, enclosed by rusted fences crowned with menacing barbed wire. Struggling to find his voice, Elliot's throat constricted, words trapped in a vice of tension. With effort, he managed to croak out a question, his voice a mere whisper amidst the silence. "Where am I?" The tolling of bells ceased, and the figures converged, their faded forms fixating on the towers flanking the gate. High above, the mannequin-like sentries nodded in silent assent. With a piercing screech, the gate sealed shut, leaving Elliot alone within the confines of the compound. The figures dispersed, each retreating into the darkness without acknowledging his presence. Elliot pondered for a fleeting moment before rousing himself and proceeding through the dimly illuminated compound. Where exactly was he? His mind swirled with countless thoughts. If this were a dream, surely he would have awakened by now. This must be akin to the plight of a caged creature, bewildered, fearful, disoriented. A soft sniffle broke the silence, drawing Elliot's attention. His gaze darted around in search of the source. Sniff, sniff. The sound drew nearer from a specific direction. Intrigued, Elliot followed, arriving at a row of dilapidated shacks, their doors firmly shut and locked. As he scanned for the origin of the sound, he approached the nearest shack. Peering through a gap in the decaying wood, he strained to discern anything within the darkness. Sniff, sniff. Once more, the sound echoed, closer this time. Elliot ventured into the heart of the shack row, swiveling in every direction to locate the source. At last, he pinpointed it. Huddled near one of the shacks, wrapped in a threadbare fleece blanket, was a woman clad in striped attire, her garments riddled with holes. She must have been freezing. Elliot, in contrast, wore clothing devoid of any openings, yet a chill still lingered in the air. With caution, Elliot raised his hand, poised to speak. The woman glanced up, revealing a weathered visage with unkempt hair, neglected for months. "What do you want?" she snapped, her tone tinged with irritation. Taken aback by her abruptness, Elliot paused to gather his thoughts. "W, where am I?" The woman regarded him with a quizzical expression, as though dealing with a simpleton. "Say that again. Where am I?" "You can't be serious." "I am not." She sighed, briefly closing her eyes. "You're in Daudesim." "Daudesim? Is that German or something?" "No." "Then what language is it?" "I haven't a clue." None of this provided Elliot with any clarity about his surroundings, leaving his mind racing with unanswered questions. "Well, why is this camp named that way?" She rolled her eyes at his query. "That's not the camp's name. It's the name of the realm." Elliot struggled to comprehend. A realm, like an alternate dimension. "Why are we all here then?" "Because I'm Jewish. That's why I'm stuck in this camp anyway." "But I'm not a Jew. I'm not one of you. You needn't be a Jew to find yourself here," she retorted, rising slowly, her agitation mounting with each passing moment. As the conversation dragged on, Elliot's confusion deepened. "Then why am I here?" Gradually, her hand emerged from the blanket. "I'll tell you why," she declared, pointing an accusatory finger at him. "Because you embody the very essence of those who erected this place." Elliot's expression shifted, a blend of confusion and offense. "How so?" She scoffed at his question. "How so? Allow me to elucidate. Ignorance. You represent the breed that stubbornly clings to ignorance, resistant to change. It's individuals like you who incarcerate individuals like me. Innovators, catalysts of change. You refuse to acknowledge the necessity of change, whether for better or worse. So you confine us to these striped garments, behind these fences, stripping us of our possessions and subjecting us to the torment of our own thoughts, while our souls endure agonizing trials. Her voice rose to a shriek. People like you have shaped the world as it stands today, always evading accountability, forever shifting blame, refusing to confront reality. That is why you find yourself in this predicament. Elliot attempted one final inquiry, but that doesn't X. Enough of your incessant questioning. Leave me to my anguish, she screamed, cutting him off. Her outburst drew the attention of others in striped attire, who peered out from their shacks, anticipating what would unfold next. Clunk. From the nearby tower, an iron door slammed open. 3 guards emerged, brandishing rusted batons. The deranged woman redirected her focus from Elliot to the advancing guards. Seizing a stone from the ground, she hurled it in their direction. Be gone. Leave us be. Allow a shred of decency to prevail. The guards encircled her, swiftly moving to restrain her, clasping her hands and head while one lingered at a distance, vigilant. Undeterred, she resisted their efforts, managing to wrench one hand free from the guard's grip, delivering a feeble blow to the nearest one. Yet, her defiance was swiftly met with retaliation. The observing guard struck her across the face with the back of his hand, then firmly seized her hand, immobilizing her fingers. Meanwhile, the other guards ruthlessly battered her knees with their cold batons until the sickening sound of cracking bones filled the air, and she crumpled in agony. The guard clasping her hand reached for his belt, drawing forth a blade. She struggled relentlessly, attempting to wrest her hand free, but the icy grip of the guard remained steadfast. Elliot witnessed the unfolding horror as the knife's keen edge pressed against the center of her pinky. With frantic vigor, the woman thrashed her body, seeking escape, yet her efforts were thwarted by the other guards. She thrashed her head from side to side, her screams piercing the air. Please, no, I beg of you. The knife-wielding Gestapo locked eyes with her, his weathered face etched with nails where his pupils should have been. Saw, saw, saw. Methodically, the Gestapo commenced sawing through her pinky, savoring each agonizing moment. Wide-eyed with torment, she frantically scanned her surroundings, struggling to divert her focus from the pain. Her screams reverberated, each cry prolonging the torturous ordeal. With excruciating slowness, the blade progressed through her fingers, starting with the pinky, then the index, moving on to the middle, and concluding with the ring finger. For the thumb, instead of sawing, he deftly inserted the blade into its base joint, exerting pressure until the thumb detached. Throughout, his gaze remained fixed on her visage, unrelenting. Elliot bore witness to the grisly spectacle, paralyzed with terror, unable to avert his gaze. He watched as blood trickled down her arm, staining her monochrome attire. As the soulless figure completed the gruesome task, he plunged the blade into her shoulder, then exchanged it for his baton, viciously assaulting her teeth with its rusted edge. The other guards joined in, mercilessly targeting any unbroken joints, shattering every rib, until they heard the sickening crack of each one, pulverizing her flesh until it turned a sickly shade of purple. With their brutality concluded, they stowed away their batons. The guard retrieved his knife, and they resumed their watchtower duties, their blood-spattered uniforms a grim testament to their savagery. Meanwhile, as the guards ascended the tower, their garments besmirched with gore, Elliot grappled with the harrowing reality of what he had just witnessed. The woman lay motionless, her only movement the gentle sway of her hair in the breeze. Elliot recoiled in horror, his hand instinctively covering his mouth. The unease in his stomach deepened, leaving him to wonder about the depths of this nightmare. Abruptly, the motionless figure convulsed, blood spewing forth from her lips. Each labored breath was a battle. Agony etched into every gasp as she struggled to fill her lungs. But the wounds proved relentless, sealing her fate as she suffocated before their eyes. "She won't be rising again, lad. Best you look away," came a gravelly voice from behind Elliot, tinged with a southern drawl. Turning, Elliot beheld an elder man, his face weathered with age, his snow-white hair cropped short. Offering advice, the elder continued, "Seems you're fresh round here. Keep a low profile, steer clear of trouble, and them guards'll leave you be. They reserve their wrath for the disruptors." Elliot pondered, ruefully rubbing the back of his head. Had the woman not reacted so vehemently to his inquiries, perhaps she'd still draw breath. "Thank you," Elliot murmured softly. "Folks round here call me Forrest. And you?" inquired the elder. "Elliot." "Ah, an intriguing name," mused Forrest, a shadow of sorrow crossing his features. Peering past Elliot, Forrest's gaze softened. "Poor Linda." Elliot glanced back, then returned his gaze to Forrest, struggling to meet his eyes, a sense of shame washing over him. I don't know what to say." Forrest regarded him with a quizzical look, arching one eyebrow. "About what, son? The departed woman, Linda, or the vehicular mishap?" Elliot faltered, his mouth agape, staring at Forrest in disbelief. How could you know about the accident?" Forrest's countenance turned enigmatic. "That's why you're here, ain't it? Why else would the physicians have administered that anesthesia? A car wreck'll bring you to these parts. But how did you come by this knowledge?" "I'm the individual you collided with, Elliot," the other motorist. Time seemed to freeze for Elliot. Desperate for an escape, he glanced upwards at the clock looming over them. Its hands now rested on the 6, indicating a passage of 4.5 hours. Oddly, the duration felt far shorter to Elliot. "Here, time tends to dart ahead when you're engrossed in something," Forrest remarked, as if deciphering Elliot's inner turmoil. Elliot edged backward, his hand rising hesitantly. What brings you here?" Forrest sighed wearily. "Because you refused to face the truth. The accident was your doing." "No, it was yours," Elliot retorted defensively. Forrest closed his eyes, shaking his head. "No, it wasn't. You ran the stop sign. I was merely returning home from Christmas festivities, an innocent bystander." No. Forrest's gaze bore into Elliot's soul. "Must I delve into specifics?" "Very well. It was precisely at midnight on Christmas night. Contemplating my mortality, I ventured out in my aged Cadillac for a quiet drive along a seldom trafficked street." With a heavy sigh, Forrest continued his narrative. "And then there was you. After a night of revelry, you hurried homeward, oblivious to the hour. 2 hours had slipped by before you noticed, prompting you to accelerate down a sparsely traveled road, heedless of a neglected stop sign. Oblivious to my approaching headlights, our destinies converge. In the crash, you were rendered unconscious, saved only by the airbag. Your shoulder bore the brunt of the impact, fractured from the force. Meanwhile, your vehicle's collision trapped me, leaving me immobile. I sustained injuries, manageable had your car not struck mine precisely where it did. Trapped and helpless, I watched as flames engulfed my vehicle, my cries for aid unanswered as bystanders dialed 911 and awaited rescue. Eventually, the flames consumed me, claiming me as they did my vehicle." Forrest advanced towards Elliot, his finger pressing lightly against Elliot's chest. "Then you found yourself in the hospital. Police officers swarmed, probing about the accident. No witnesses surfaced, everyone snug in their beds when the collision occurred. You alone held the truth. And you." Forrest's jaw clenched, his other hand forming a fist. "You missiled them, fabricated a tale of halting at the stop sign, blaming the collision solely on me. Your yarn held weight, given my 12-year battle with alcoholism. Investigators surmised I must have relapsed, my charred remains offering no means to verify alcohol in my system. You concealed the truth, absolving yourself of guilt while I bore the blame. Elliot's gaze shifted, his head swaying in denial. No, no, you could have braked, anticipated my headlights at the stop sign. Son, at my age, reflexes aren't as swift as yours. Once more, Elliot glanced at the clock. It now read 7. Time seemed to hasten with each passing hour. What awaited when the clock struck 12? Forrest placed a comforting hand on Elliot's shoulder. Face the reality, son. With a decisive sweep, Elliot shrugged off Forrest's touch. Damn you, you're delusional. With that, Elliot pivoted and bolted, his pace escalating toward the weathered fence. He collided with the barrier, feeling its jagged surface against his palms. Release me from this place. I don't belong here. His cries echoed, unanswered, enveloping him in a shroud of desolation. Loneliness crept into his soul, tears tracing his cheeks. If only he could rewrite the past, if only he could find solace in his mother's embrace, assurance that he wasn't stranded in this surreal hell. Resting his head against his arm, Elliot noticed a gaunt figure approaching. Skeletal and frail, the man's breath wheezed audibly, eyes fixated solely on Elliot. Arms crossed, he shivered, beckoning Elliot closer. Hey you, yes, you by the fence. Come over, I've a question for you. Elliot wiped his tears, cautiously drawing near the emaciated man. He motioned Elliot closer, his voice a whisper. Come closer. The guards won't hear us here. Elliot complied, though wary of the man's intentions. What's your demand? Slowly, the man unfurled his arms, revealing a makeshift blade carved from wood. Hand over your shirt, he demanded, his tone laced with menace. Elliot instinctively recoiled. The sight of the shiv sparked a surge of fear, yet he endeavored to maintain composure, grappling with rising tension. He raised a placating hand. Let's not escalate this. Put the weapon down. The emaciated assailant hesitated, his unblinking gaze fixed on Elliot. In a flash, the aggressor lunged, slicing a deep gash into Elliot's hand. AJ. Elliot winced in agony, clutching his wounded hand, now slick with blood. The assailant had actually struck him. Just give me the Dan shirt. The guards won't give a damn if I end you. Elliot glanced towards the nearby watchtower. 3 guards observed, indifferent to the unfolding drama. Impatient, the crazed man gestured urgently. Hurry up. Elliot swiftly peeled off his shirt, tossing it to the assailant. The man hastily donned the garment, brandishing the blade once more. Good. Now scram before I strip you further. With that, Elliot fled, nursing his injured hand, desperate to staunch the bleeding. For another half hour, he wandered aimlessly, guided only by the clock above. The throbbing pain in his hand consumed his senses, a relentless reminder of his ordeal. He sought distraction, any respite from the piercing agony. Finally, he slumped against a concrete edifice, exhaustion weighing heavily upon him. His breath came in ragged gasps, his mouth agape with fatigue. The urge to surrender to sleep overwhelmed him. The weariness gnawed at him, rendering him indifferent to his plight. Perhaps, he mused faintly, it would have been easier to let the crazed assailant end his torment. At a certain juncture, he surrendered to exhaustion, allowing his eyelids to descend as sleep claimed him. Ding, ding. Startled, Elliot bolted upright, surveying his surroundings with urgency. The clock, both hands poised at 12. Guards swarmed the area, herding residents out of their shacks and into the biting cold, directing them towards the looming concrete structures. Before him loomed a guard, gesturing for him to rise. Elliot met the gesture with a steely gaze, then shut his eyes. A chill wooden hand seized his arm, hoisting him to his feet. Eyes snapping open, Elliot recoiled, unleashing a defiant cry as he shoved the guard away. Damn you. 2 guards, alerted by the commotion, hurried to the scene, encircling Elliot. He stood his ground, nursing his injured hand, bracing for their onslaught. Shing. Batons drawn, the Gestapo motioned for him to comply, but Elliot remained rooted. Whack. Elliot was felled, the trio of wooden figures raining blows upon him, battering his arms mercilessly. Each strike unleashed a wave of searing pain, radiating through his limbs, leaving him writhing in agony. He attempted to shield himself, but his efforts were futile, met with relentless brutality. In a panic, he rolled, yet the guards persisted, assaulting his back with relentless force. Pain flared and receded with each strike, but when directed at his spine, it pulled, intensifying with every blow. One guard pinned him down with a booted foot, probing his wounded hand with cruel curiosity. Thumbing the wound, it drove deeper, eliciting agonized screams from Elliot as waves of pain surged through his body. His fingers trembled, crippled by the relentless torment. Amidst the chaos, 4 ominous structures loomed, bunker-like and foreboding, crowned with eerie chimneys. Atop each, Gestapo figures stood sentinel, overseeing the grim proceedings. Elliot and his fellow captives were herded into lines, compelled to march forward into the abyss. Echoes of brutal beatings reverberated, a cacophony of senseless violence, as Elliot wondered if among them was the mugging assailant, now facing his own merciless punishment. Within, they were herded into a cramped chamber, its rear dominated by a towering metal portal, ominous in its implication. Elliot's dread surged. He knew what lay beyond. Years of historical tums had imparted a grim awareness. Perhaps there remained a chance of escape. Where was Forrest? If he could locate him, salvation might yet be attainable. Forrest. He cried above the din of weeping and murmurs. Forrest. His call echoed, unanswered. Was Forrest confined elsewhere? Elliot shed his trousers, scouring the room anew. Forrest. A guard at the doorway singled him out, motioning him forward, wary of further brutality. Elliot complied, shoulders hunched, resignation etched into his demeanor. Broken in spirit and body, all he could muster was hope. Fear gripped him tight, envisioning the impending ordeal. His mind recoiled, contemplating the agonies ahead. Escorted down a corridor, he entered a chamber brimming with apparatus resembling ovens, yet harboring a far grimmer purpose. Peering into each, he recognized none. Further still, until he reached the last pair. His gaze fell upon the final one. Forrest. Relief flooded him. Forrest, he exclaimed eagerly. Forrest looked up, astonishment flickering across his face. I'm sorry. It's all my doing, and I see it now. Silence met his plea. Forrest merely shook his head, mouthing, "It's too late." The guards opened the hatch to the crematorium, sliding out the extended metal tray. Gesturing for him to ascend, Elliot stood firm. "I won't go willingly," he declared, summoning a flicker of defiance. Their resolve unyielding, the guards seized him, forcing him face down onto the tray before sliding him in, sealing the hatch behind him. The chill metal pressed against his bare skin as Elliot rolled onto his back, futilely kicking at the unyielding hatch. Resigned, he gazed up at the ceiling, grappling with the realization. It was all his doing. The car accident, the deception that tarnished Forrest's honor, echoing the woman's indictment. It was individuals like him, refusing accountability, that perpetuated the world beyond these walls. Beneath him, a faint glow emanated, the tray's frigid surface warming. Oh, how he longed for this to be but a dream.